This is a podcast from The Bugle.
It was all too much. Gathering up her skirts, Amelia ran from the ballroom and into the cool darkness of the manor garden. She dashed past the ornamental pond and into the shrubberies, feeling her heart pound and her breath labour past the constriction of her tight-laced corset. Dizzied from lack of oxygen, she stopped to put her hand on a tree and gasp, gulping sweet breaths of night air. How could he have won her heart and thus betrayed her? What a fool she'd been. "Amelia!" She heard the Duke's heavy footsteps on the paving stone. "Amelia, my darling, you must listen to me. It's all a terrible misunderstanding." Warm hands seized her tiny waist and spun her towards him. She swung for a slap, only to find her wrist caught in an iron grip. His breath fanned her face in the darkness, smelling of mint and expensive wine and sandalwood and an ineffable musk that was only him. "Amelia, you must listen to the Gargle." Welcome to the Gargle, the sonic, glossy magazine to the Bugle's audio newspaper for a visual world. I am your host, Alice Fraser, and these are your guest editors for today's edition of the magazine. Joe Kent-Walters, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me. I thought I was in the wrong podcast for a minute there with the intro. Got very scared. I've not got much literary knowledge, so I'm in the right one, I think.
I mean, this is my strategy, is starting the podcast with a different epic intro every time. And I've realised what that means is that ideally anyone listening should think they're listening to the wrong podcast for about the first 20 seconds, which is a terrible marketing strategy.
No, that's a hook. That's a hook.
I thought I was on some kind of Bridgerton recap show, but clearly not. Oh, God.
That voice was our second guest editor for this week's edition of the magazine, which is Dan Ilic. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you. In true Bridgerton style, I was speaking without being introduced to the room. Sorry, Alice, so terribly sorry.
Scandalous. I mean, this is the etiquette of podcasting, is that you mustn't speak until you've first been introduced by a mutual friend. How delightful. Very Regency of us all. Well, before we take tea in the approved fashion, which is this week's top stories, let's have a look at the front cover of this week's magazine. The front cover this week is the River Seine in Paris, controversially being cleaned up for the Olympics against the will of the people. I don't know if you've been following this story, Dan. Would you shit in a river for political purposes?
Yes, I love this story so much. The mayor was going to declare that they were going to go for a swim in the river just to prove that the Seine was clean. Then thousands of Parisians said, well, we are going to shit in the river just to prove the mayor wrong. And I think that is just absolutely beautiful. That is not the pista resistance. That is the pooter resistance. Well done, Paris. You've done an incredible job there. I wish I was on the ground. You know, I know this is not a political podcast, Alice, but Julian Assange is arriving back in Australia today. But I don't give a shit about Julian Assange. I want to go to Paris. I want to see people shit in front of the mayor. And apparently there's some kind of app or some kind of web portal that can give you a location on the Seine and tell you when exactly to do a shit, so that your shit will have more chance of hitting the mayor than anybody else's shit. And that is that is true French style. I love that. That is great. That is very egalitarian indeed.
And the satirical cartoon this week is Justin Timberlake being arrested for drunk driving. He was not recognised by the policeman who arrested him because the policeman who arrested him was too young, which I feel... Look, I think that is the biggest argument I've ever heard for getting more middle-aged women into the police force. Because had that been a suburban mother of three, he would have gone free as a bird.
That is not true. Had that been a suburban mother of three, he would have been locked up for days on end, because they would have known and remembered what he did to Britney Spears, and it would have been all over for Timberlake.
Yeah, but maybe if they were young enough, they'd just think, are you the voice in Shrek 3 as the prince? No way. That's the biggest thing he's got in my generation.
I mean, the argument in court has to be, I'm going to be Frey. Did I introduce that entire story for that punchline?
I'm bringing sobriety back. Hey! I'm not drinking anything whack. Hey!
Our top story this week is wishful environment thinking news, which is the news that Gen Z, more than any other generation, want to get jobs that will help them with the environment, and yet do not know how to get jobs that will help them help the environment. Dan Ilic, you very famously and award-winningly help the environment. Can you unpack this story for us?
Yeah, apparently, this is a survey, according to LinkedIn, they used a whole bunch of data to survey a whole bunch of Gen Zs about how they want to help the environment. It turns out they don't actually have the skills to help the environment. And now, apparently, people within the next 5 years, they really want to get a job. But I don't think the next 5 years is too late. They need a job right now. Western society, by the way, has had a long history of children and carbon removal. Like, I saw that documentary Mary Poppins, and they had like lots of little kids cleaning out those chimneys. They had a whole song about it. I think we should get over ourselves, forget about child laws, labour laws, and just get this problem sorted. Get the kids in the chimneys, is what I'm saying. Ideally, of course, the kids could all run for office, but maybe this is, the best way out of this, because if you're Gen Z, you're probably like in your late teens, 20s now. You need to get out on the hustings. You need to kiss some babies, and people will let you because you are a baby. It won't be any weird. Like, it's not weird at all for a baby to kiss a baby. Apparently, LinkedIn also said that Gen Z are lacking skills when it comes to green jobs. And one of the skills they say that Gen Z are lacking are measuring carbon emissions. This is where I think LinkedIn is wrong. I think they're a bit out of touch, because if they've ever met a Gen Z person, they should know that they are way past carbon. In fact, they're onto more deadly, more potent greenhouse gases. If LinkedIn ever dared to go and survey a boarding school dorm, they would see Gen Zers effectively measuring methane emissions on a nightly basis, a much deadlier greenhouse gas than carbon. Look, I'm a big believer in putting Gen Z in charge of all the fugitive emissions, because if they know who smelt it, they can tell you who dealt it, and then they can put those countries into give them a big wedgie and then throw them down the hill in a recycling bin. And I think that is climate justice right there.
See, as a child, I remember we were fed Captain Planet, and then all of our school excursions involved picking up rubbish, or maybe that's just the school I went to. There was quite a few open days where we all had to go and pick up rubbish. Was this part of your experience, or did I just go to a particularly environmentally conscious / child labour school?
Folks, I was once a part of the SRC, the Student Representative Council, in high school. And this is a big deal. Hey, look, leadership material. That's me, guys. Youth leader right here.
3-time Australian Comedy Podcast of the Year winner.
Four times. But who's counting? Who's counting? Not this SRC leader. No. And part of the deal was I created this E-plan. This E-plan was called the Environment Plan, and I brokered a deal with the school management, i.e. the principal, that I could solicit music tracks, popular music of the day, and play it in the last 5 minutes of lunchtime. And when people heard the cool music, they knew it was time to pick up trash and put it in the bin. So that was the E-plan. That was my very early foray into environmental public policy.
You could do worse. I've seen, and most politicians seem to do worse. Sorry, politics bell, Ped. Joe, what are your thoughts on this?
On the Gen Z environmental issue? Well, as I am a Gen Z. I've come clean. I'm one of them. I'm one of the baby kissers.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. I've been here all along. I've been spying on you.
Hang on a second. Gen Z are a lot older than I thought they were.
Yeah. Too right. We're fixing your fridges. We're in your fridges. We're hiding. We're everywhere. I think
odd that the only two examples you've given here were fridge based.
Yeah, well, we did. And actually, fridges are not so good for the environment. It's all we learned in school. It's all they taught us was fridges. We're so cold. We just want. I read a statistic in the article that said, 1 in 20 Gen Zs lack green skills, and I really resented that because from my personal experience, I've got loads of friends who are really good at rolling spliffs and packing bongs. We love it. People can smoke loads of it. So I resent that really. I think we've got loads of those skills, very transferable. You know what I mean? Maybe if we can pack a bong, maybe we can pack the ozone. You know what I mean? Plug those holes in.
Look, Joe, if you and your Gen Z refrigerator mates could just fix up the CFCs that you pack in the back of fridges, then we would have an ozone layer.
Well, yeah, there you go. I don't know. I think that also another thing that I think skews the data here is that millennials and boomers, they're in a lot of ways they're a lot more confident than Gen Zs, especially when it comes to the professional world. We've been sort of stuck in internships for so long. We're like overly polite. We're meek. We're a meek generation. And someone said hello to me the other day on the street, and I said, "Thank you." That was my gut. That was my gut reaction. So I'm not gonna bolster my CV by saying that I know anything about science. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. I'm meek. I'm just happy to be here.
I guess the problem with Gen Z is that they're going to be asking everyone for permission to make solar and wind projects when no one actually wants them.
Yeah, it's true.
I think we should look to Generation Z, from Generation Z to Generation X, and go with the Bart Simpson motto of "Don't have a cow, man," if we cut down our beef exports.
Very good, very good.
It's one of the worst things you can do for the environment on a personal level, but actually, personal level is dog shit. What we really need to be doing is knocking up the CEO of Shell and dangle him off the edge of something, a ball pit by his ankle.
Yeah. I thought you meant impregnate him.
We're not talking violence, though, are we, Alice? We're really just talking about like some kind of comical TV game show, Japanese style, sort of. Yeah.
Well, ball pit, a pit full of human testicles. Your ad section now, because you can't be what you can't buy. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Red Light Therapy Bargain Edition, which is where instead of spending thousands of pounds on a mask or panel or bed to get your dose of anti-inflammatory, anti-aging light wavelengths, you just stop at a lot of red lights on the street and see what that does for your wrinkles. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by some guy's opinions about Julian Assange on the bus. Ever wanted to know what some guy thinks about Julian Assange on the bus? Innocent, guilty, hero, creep, lizard in disguise? We have all the Julian Assange opinions available to you now in bus, train, and street harassment formats. I debated against him once. And you were there, Dan.
Was I?
think
oh my
you were...
gosh.
Yeah, it was a Splendor in the Grass. He came in via Skype, back when Skype was a thing. And the most notable thing, he was basically there to plug WikiLeaks and the WikiLeaks party. And the most notable thing was a guy who looked exactly like a tiny Julian Assange in the audience, who was outraged that we were doing a debate against his hero. And I don't know whether he supported Julian Assange because he believed in freedom of the press or because he supported the right to get famous while looking like a bargain bin Draco Malfoy. But he threw a bottle of water at us.
I don't even remember this. Oh my God.
Yeah. He came up to the stage and he threw a plastic bottle of water onto the stage, which means that this ad was brought to you by half a glass of water. Gotcha. You thought that was a rambling anecdote off the top of my head, but it was actually a pre-written bit, as is this. Now it's time for Nude sauna sessions news now.
Oh, God.
And this is the news that in non-green jobs, there's a game studio that is requiring nude sauna sessions from its employees. Joe Kent-Walters, you're sweating. Can you unpack this story for us?
I'm in a sauna right now. I thought let's go authentically with it. So I found it a little bit difficult to wrap my head around because it all revolved a little bit around a beef between a former employee and this guy. But one of the things I found sort of give the story a little bit more clarity is that the game in question was a game in a sauna, like based in a sauna, like sauna simulator. So the advert was like, oh, if you want a program for sauna simulator, you have to be in a sauna. But I really think that this is the whole thing is just this guy's kind of creepy ruse. That's my take, because because the company is financially bankrupt. You can look up the company on Company's House, and they've been struggling to pay their employees. It's bankrupt because I think it's just one guy's kind of big fetish machine. And when he was trying to defend himself and saying oh, I've got a quote from him. Hang on. In a quote, he said, he was talking about, the benefits of, we're making this game about a sauna, so it's great when people are in the sauna and coming up with that. He says, my narrative girls had to go to the sauna with me to come up with an amazing script for the proof of concept. But he says, my narrative girls. Like, that's like trying to defend yourself for not being a misogynist by starting the sentence. Well, me lovely ladies were all coming with me into the sun. They're very good at it. So yeah, no, my take is I think he's a creepy guy, and I think he's been rumbled that he's just been sort of using investor money to feed his sauna fetish. That's my take.
Joe, I think you're being too harsh on this guy. Like, I used to work at Activision as a game maker, and I made Call of Duty. And the amount of Russians I had to kill to get that game into production was astonishing. I've got blood on my hands, but it's realistically looking blood. I know how to use Unreal Engine, so hey, whatever.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, famously realistic games, aren't they?
Yeah. And that's why you see the Japanese creators of Nintendo's Mario Brothers jumping on mushrooms all day long.
Yeah, fists are bleeding from smashing blocks just to really get a feel for it.
Yeah, that's the best excuse when you get called up by the cops for kidnapping a princess. It's like, I'm doing research for a game level.
I'm doing research for a game level.
Don't send the cops, send a plumber.
Yeah, why are we sending a plumber to rescue a princess? The founder of the studio said something very strange, among other things. I don't want to waste my time to explain the difference. What's the difference between a Ruska Banya or a dry sauna? You have to feel it. I'm like, actually, maybe that is something to waste your time explaining about, or at least spend your days making a game. Look, I don't think the game's going to be very popular. Apparently, it's only going to be available on Steam. So that's a very niche in the gaming reference.
Although I think you need to spend a bit more time in the sauna because they're usually dry. Actually, I've got to say this. You want to hop in here with me? Trust me, it's a good time.
This company is very problematic. It's a very problematic company. Like, if you go to HR, they'll only see you if you also accept a massage. And apparently, it's the only way to get your case a happy resolution.
And that brings us to our reviews section. As you know, each week we ask our guest editors to bring in something to review out of 5 stars. Dan, what have you brought in for us today?
I've brought in a fork, crafted unapologetically from a single piece of stainless steel. The fork is simultaneously more complex than the spoon, but it's also very similar in function to a pair of chopsticks, but it's actually much simpler in the way you use it. A fork fits in between the thumb and the forefinger, eliminating fatigue during extended dining sessions. Forks have really kind of mastered the seamless transition from hand to plate, allowing a vector from plate to mouth. Forks are great for anyone that wants to bite off more than they can chew. And while the minimalist design is functional, some might find those clean lines rather sterile, though sterile, could be argued, is a feature, not a bug. So I say fork yes, 4 stars.
Did you choose 4 stars because of the 4 tines of the fork, Dan?
Yes, well, I think so. 1 star per prong is what I was going for, yes.
No stars for the handle, though. What's wrong with the handle?
No stars for the handle. No.
3 stars for a fish fork. Joe, what have you brought in for us?
I've brought in Chris Pratt's Garfield. He's here with me. And let me tell you, he's annoying. He's running round. He's like, I don't know a lot about Garfield, but I thought he's a lazy cat who's sarcastic and he likes lasagna. This guy's jumping around. He's grinning from cheek to cheek. he's just enthusiastic about it. He loves everything, and he doesn't even have any lasagna on him. He's rubbish. 1 star for Chris Pratt's Garfield. And his dad's Samuel L. Jackson. I don't know how that works, but that's the film.
Joe, how does he feel about Mondays?
Let me just ask him. Chris Pratt's Garfield. How do you feel about Mondays? I love him. He loves it. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't think this guy's Garfield. I don't think he is. I don't think he is Garfield. 1 star. He's a liar.
Oh.
And that brings us to our cheating news of the week. This is the news that a man has been discovered by his wife cheating, and the way that she discovered him was via messages that were synced to a family computer, all of which pretty par for the course. The next step, however, will shock you. The man has sued Apple for revealing his infidelity to his wife. Joe, you've eaten an apple. Can you unpack this story for us?
Yeah, So it was not, just any infidelity. It was messages to a sex worker that he'd sent, and he'd not realised that on your phone there's like a setting where that if you don't click it, it syncs all of those messages to your family computer. So his kid was probably going on to play Angry Birds, and instead was faced with an angry. Anyway, but I just think this guy, he's probably friends with his sauna creep, isn't he? They're probably mates. Because I think he's done a messy job. He's not done a good job of covering it up, and I feel like suing Apple for this is like suing Dettol for not cleaning 99.9% of germs on your blood-stained shirt. You know what I mean? It's like he's red-handed. He's messy. He's got guilt all over him. This doesn't make a difference, but he's clutching at straws.
Yeah, sounds like he's just trying to get the house back.
Well, she filed for divorce, and it cost him £5 million or more than £5 million, and his statement is that they probably wouldn't have gotten divorced if Apple hadn't revealed the messages in such a brutal way, which is to say by not letting him delete them off his computer, and that had Apple not deleted the messages, he would have been able to have a conversation with her in a rational way and might still be married today. And what he means by that is what he would have been able to do is continue to hide his sexual infidelities from his wife until one or both of them caught an STD. That is, I think the iMessages is less brutal than sweetheart, you've got chlamydia.
I'm no expert, but I feel like the rational person here is the wife. And I think, she's the rational person out of this relationship.
It's just so terrible. I think the most terrible thing about this is that he is not as ashamed as he should be. Because if he were as ashamed as he should be, he would take his licks, deal with the divorce, and try and rewrite his character among his closest, nearest, and dearest. But instead, he's made himself international news by suing one of the largest companies in the entire world.
Yeah. He really puts the class into class action. That's what he does. That's what he's I mean, there's so many other ways to communicate with sex workers in 2024. You don't have to use a phone. You could use smoke signals. That is, stand at the end of the bar, light a smoke, look like a loser, all alone. Somebody will eventually come up to you and say, "Hey, are you a lonesome loser that needs a blowjob?" And then you're in. That's how you go. Or pigeons. I mean, pigeons are a risk-free way to communicate to sex workers because no spouse is going to want to hang in the pigeon coop as you frantically receive and send messages. Though it can take a few days to have that conversation. Could you, it takes a day to set the location, a day to set the costumes, a day to set the kink. By the time 3 or 4 days are gone, you've probably knocked one out anyway and you're no longer horny. So pigeons do have their downside.
I just feel like iMessage was his, the move was not iMessage. The move was there are plenty of things from Snapchat to Signal that pride themselves on their privacy settings. He's not hiding it himself. He's coming home with a collar full of lipstick emojis.
I reckon, his operational security is so bad. I reckon it's something that you shouldn't even have to worry about in a in a relationship like that. But I reckon that she already knew for a very long time what was going on, and she was just trying to find the receipts.
And that brings us to our final story of this week, which is the news that an influencer in Dubai has been fined for trespassing on Sardinia's famous pink beach. Dan Ilic, you are not an influencer. Can you unpack this story for us?
This is great. It's a Dubai-based influenza. Sorry, I've just had my influenza shot, so influenza's on the brain. A Dubai-based influencer. She got fined 1,800 euros for trespassing on this incredible beach in Sardinia. No tourists are allowed to go there. It's an island. It's protected. It costs if you flout the rules, you get fined like a certain amount, and then if you take a vessel that hasn't been given permission, then you get fined another amount. So she got charged quite a bit of money, and the reason she got caught was she flouted the rules, and she also took a terrible video with Edith Piaf of her walking on these very rare pink sands, and then posted that video to her 35,000 followers, as if the people who run that island are never going to see the tag when you tag that island. She got done. She got done. It's like if you're going to do crimes, don't do crimes on social media. It's disastrous. It's very bad. People find out.
Well, it feels like it's such an odd attitude to life, like as though if you don't get caught doing something in the moment, it's not a crime. I don't understand the logic of what she was thinking. The point of breaking the law, I mean, is that you don't leave any evidence. At least all the crimes I've ever committed, I've never told anyone about. Joe?
They're here. I was a spy all along. I'm from the police. I'm new to the pod. No one background checked me. We're coming for you. me and Chris Pratt's Garfield are gonna cuff you.
I'm gonna use the human shield of Justin Timberlake, but you won't know who he is because you're a Gen Zer.
I'm repelled by how unknown this guy is to me.
He's eerily symmetrical in his features, and yet I don't recognise him.
Crazy story. I mean, I think if she probably put one of those. There's a bit of a problem at the moment on Instagram where it's detecting everything as made with AI. I don't know if you've seen this. People are putting their Edinburgh posters up at the moment, and there's all these graphic designers who've worked really hard on something, and then it says made with AI. It automatically puts it on. So they're it's a bit of a controversy at the moment, but that could go in her favour. She whacks a filter on this, made with AI. The whole thing never happened. It was generated. You know what I mean? If a tree fell in a AI-generated forest and no one heard it, did it ever really fall?
Look, if you can't get a job in the environmental sciences, Joe, you can get a job as a crime consultant.
Joe, I think you're onto a brand new business model here. I think there is a whole new market for influencers to generate these videos rather than actually experience these videos, and that way they could rack up the clout and the likes just with their AI walks on the pink beach. It doesn't have to be pink beach. It could be a fuchsia beach, or it could be a teal beach.
It could be the rings of Saturn. Yeah, why not?
I mean, this is the thing. She could have just gone on any beach and then coloured it in with paint afterwards.
And also, can I just say, the sand doesn't look all that pink. It looks pretty like a normal beach. It doesn't look like an impressive beach, but maybe in European or Mediterranean standards, it is an impressive beach. She should just come to Australia. We've got heaps of things you could stomp on that look very similar. It'll be fine.
My favourite kind of influencers are trad-wife mumfluencers, which if you don't know what a trad-wife mumfluencer is, she is a lady who appears online. If you've never come across her, just Google nappies for a while and she'll arrive. But her job is to go online and tell women that women shouldn't have a job, and that people shouldn't listen to women, and women should kind of be in the home and be making their husbands happy and so on and so forth. And women shouldn't be earning money. They should be making their husbands happy and their children comfortable and so on and so forth. And her saying that women shouldn't have a job and women shouldn't get paid is her job that she gets paid for. So I think that's... What's your favourite influencer, Joe?
Gosh, I think the one that I find really fascinating at the moment, my girlfriend is obsessed with Gypsy Rose. I don't know if you're at all familiar with Gypsy Rose. So she was basically at the same. I mean, it's a long story, but I'll sum it up quickly. That she was in the noughties involved in one of the most horrific kind of abuse scandals, which essentially ended with her paying for her boyfriend to murder her mother, her abusive mother. And she was jailed for 8 years for this. And now she's been released from jail and walked straight out into a full-time celebrity influencer career. She's got millions and millions of followers. Like, people are obsessed with her. She's like one of the top influencers now. She's been on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and it blows my mind, because it's like the last minute of a Black Mirror episode. You know what I mean? Like, something horrible happens, and then there's this kind of twist that's kind of celebrated in today's pop culture. But that's exactly what's happened. If you don't know it, you should look it up. But it is a real wormhole. But she doesn't talk about any of the stuff that happened. Any of that's not the fascinating stuff. She talks mainly about like the people she's sleeping with at the moment. She's famous for the phrase "the D was fire." That's a catchphrase. But that's...
If the D was fire, see consultant from your doctor, please.
Yeah, check your husband's iMessages if the D is fire.
Dan, what's your favourite kind of influencer?
Thank you, Joe. I've now looked her up, and I am now following with great intent.
Yeah, it's a wormhole. You're gonna go down it.
There's like a catalyst at the moment with influencers where people have had enough of them. And I think that's interesting. Like in Brooklyn, there are several cafes who have banned influencers from coming into their cafe with tripods and things. And there's like the very famous example of a Korean cafe, which had a beautiful aesthetic. And because one person posted it in Brooklyn, hundreds of influencers turned up trying to replicate the same video in this cafe, and they would come in and buy one drink and then like spend 2 hours filming, and the cafe owners are just like, hey, no more influencers, please.
They've had to shut off a whole section of Kyoto to tourists. The geisha district of Kyoto no longer allows tourists in because influencers were being so obnoxious to the...
Oh my gosh!
Geishas.
I think I saw a video from this district just the other day, and it was of a boomer with an iPad chasing a geisha down the street, trying to get the perfect shot. And you could hear the tour guide going, "No, stop that, please! Don't do that, please!" And she was so intent on getting this picture, and the geisha was like moving out of the way of this woman, trying to dodge a photo. And just like she got the photo, she was so pleased with herself by getting a photo with an iPad. And it was just like, oh my God.
Just a selfie of me and a really angry looking geisha trying to run away.
Oh, I'm sorry to everybody who has a precious culture that's been ruined by tourists with iPads. I feel bad, though it wasn't me, but it will potentially be me in a few years when I get to iPad taking photo age.
And that brings me to the end of this episode of The Gargle. I'm flipping through the ad section at the back. Dan, have you got anything to plug?
I've got nothing to plug. Stuff it. I got nothing. I got. Please. Can I just plug iMessage? It's a really great service. You can put your text messages across multiple devices.
iMessage keeps you honest. I'm going to do a plug for Dan. I'm going to plug Irrational Fear. Not only do they share my initials, ARF, they're also a 4-time Best Comedy Podcast in Australia award-winning podcast. And I've also been on a number of episodes which are inarguably the best episodes. So if you do nothing else, go and look up all the episodes of Irrational Fear that I've been on.
We should make an Alice Fraser compilation special just for that plug. Thank you, Alice.
Joe, what have you got to plug?
I've got myself to plug. My show I'm doing my debut hour at the Edinburgh Fringe which is a character comedy show. I have an alter ego called Frankie Monroe, who's a demonic. He owns a working men's club in Rotherham that's also a portal to hell. So it's kind of end of the pier nightmare. It's sort of Felix Knights meets the Mighty Boosh. And it won Best Show at the Leicester Comedy Festival, so it's good. So you come see it. It's on at Monkey Barrel 2, 11:25 p.m. every night of the Fringe. So come along.
Gosh, that sounds so
amazing.
good, Joe. I hope you break even.
Oh, I absolutely will not. It's guaranteed. It's a guaranteed loss.
Well, I hope you do a run in London. I'll be in London in September. After the Edinburgh Fringe is over, I'll also be running some writers' workshops in London, and you can find out the details of those. Also in Tokyo, you can find out the details of those on my Patreon, patreon.com/Alice Fraser. It's a one-stop shop for all of my stand-up specials, podcasts, blogs, as well as my twice-weekly writers' meetings and my weekly salons where we all get in a Zoom room and chat about tricky ideas. This is a Bugle podcast and Alice Fraser production. Your editor is Ped Hunter. Your executive producer is Chris Skinner. I'll talk to you again next week.
You can listen to other programmes from The Bugle, including The Bugle, Catharsis, Tiny Revolutions, Top Stories, and The Gargle, wherever you find your podcasts.